Hey everybody, Phantom139 here, and today I've got another one of those lovely impromptu-esque videos. So, it's like the one I did a few weeks prior regarding the seasonal decline. No script, nothing, and we're just gonna kind of go through the great big state of the game blog that was posted today. Generally, everything I have read so far on a bunch of different places, most people are not happy with what it was published today. And I can't say I disagree with a lot of them. There are a lot of things that I saw in here and I was not really pleased to see either. And a number of things in here also, at least from my perspective, just kind of comes off as Bungie just doesn't care about some of the feedback that they've been given. So I'm just going to kind of run down some of these key points today and talk about my own personal thoughts on the matter. So if you haven't read this blog yet, great big blog published on Bungie's website talking about the current state of the game and feedback they've received and a couple of things that they're planning on doing, with more going to be revealed in a couple weeks with the final shape showcase. So diving down, I'm just going to kind of scroll down through here and talk about these key categories here. And I'll kind of discuss what I feel is the good and the bad with each, and then we'll kind of recap everything at the end, and I'll share my own personal feelings on what I think is going to happen as a result of this, and also what I really wish would happen going forward. So they start by talking about addressing community feedback. And there are a number of things in here that I saw. And, you see some of these issues and it's like, yeah, this is stuff that we've been talking about. But there's also a lot of categories in here that just seem to be missing as it pertains to feedback that they've been given. So the first thing to talk about is updates to ritual activities. And what they say they're going to be doing is they're going to be bumping up the rewards from ritual playlists. So effectively what they're going to do is make it so you're going to start seeing a lot more ritual engrams, so a lot more Vanguard, Crucible, and Gambit engrams when you actually participate in those activities. And also, whenever they introduce new weapons into the pool, you no longer have to wait a couple of seasons for them to become focusable. It will be something that a weapon comes out and you can focus for it immediately. So those two changes, I feel like those are some good small scale quality of life changes. And, if you're trying to find a certain new weapon, you obviously want to play with the new thing that comes out. So being able to get a good roll on it, that's definitely a plus. So I do think that that's a good change. Then we start to get into some of the head scratching / not so good things. And they start by talking about the Crucible. So one of the resounding points of feedback that has been going around the community is that ever since the release of Beyond Light, when Bungie changed the lighting engine for the game, 11 maps were removed from the game, and since that point in time, we have not gotten 11 maps back to replace them. So we are still in a lower total number of Crucible maps compared to the point when Beyond Light came out. And people have been asking to generate more maps. Bungie's response here is that they have seen the feedback, but given their studio setup and structure, that they cannot offer more than what they are currently doing, because to do so would take away efforts from designing new modes, designing changes to the Crucible, or designing new story or exotic mission content. So to me, it sounds like this is more of a problem with how Bungie is structuring their teams. Not necessarily a problem of messing with the amount of content they're delivering. So for whatever reason, it sounds to me like the team that is responsible or would be responsible for making Crucible maps is also the same team that designs the patrol destinations, the play spaces, and all of the new individual map activities. So think like exotic missions, campaign missions, all that stuff. It's the same team doing all of that stuff. So it's just a level design team in general. There's not really a PvP team, a PvE team. It's just all one individual team. And I feel like that's something that Bungie really should invest in changing. So having more of a dedicated team responsible for designing PvP maps versus having just one team for all of this content going forward. That's something I think they really should invest in doing. They talk a little bit about the brand new map. We've already heard about this map a few times, so a little bit of a preview here. We are going to get 2 new game modes in the Labs playlist next season. Checkmate, you know, I'm not really a fan of Crucible gameplay in general as it stands. This whole notion of the game trying to be an ultra competitive experience really drove me away from the experience as a whole. And I really only play Crucible stuff to kind of have a more social experience. On the flip side, the second mode they're introducing, this Relic mode, it does interest me. It's one of those more party game modes that I think that the team really should be spending some more time working on. They should be making more of these like social and party modes to actually spice up the Crucible bit. So we'll see how this goes. I'll probably give this a little bit of a shot next season, minus some of the other things that I'll be talking about later on. A couple other things they mention. They're talking about how their current experiments with matchmaking seem to be working, that they're going to be adding more Fireteam matchmaking to the other rotators. I'm not really the person to talk to as it pertains to Crucible stuff. I mean, I don't really play it a lot, nor do I enjoy it. So if you want more of a feedback or, you know, thoughts on it, you should probably go check in with a more PvP oriented content creator. Finally, they're going to be doing a new Iron Banner mode in Season 23, and they're also going to be doing a new comp weapon. So, you know, a couple of things coming back to the Crucible or being added to it, but it still feels like they should be doing a lot more, and only time will tell what they're actually planning on doing. All right, next up, Vanguard. They open with a statement that I feel is not very true. They say that the Vanguard playlists are in a solid place with a healthy population. I don't actually see this being the case. A lot of community sentiment going on right now is that the game has become quite stale, very samey. And this was actually one of the videos I was planning on doing before this great big blog was revealed and published today, was talking about how the Vanguard strikes and PvE activities in general have become just predictable to the point where everything is exactly the same. You have a couple of running sections, sometimes you fight a mini boss, sometimes you do a mechanic, and then you have a great big boss fight at the end. It's always the same thing. And it's something that I really think they need to spend time to go back and revamp. And by revamp, I mean changing the formula on how individual strikes work to make the experience feel unique every time. They mentioned that medals will be coming to Vanguard Ops and Nightfalls in 22, and that they will contribute to your score. So making it a little easier to achieve the higher thresholds for rep modifiers. I still think that they should just go back to what they had before with rep bonuses. This whole scoring system is a bit of a detriment when you have speedrunners in match-made strikes who just blow through the entire thing, and all of a sudden you're not really getting anywhere near as many points as you were before. Next up, They mentioned that they are going to be putting their resources into more varied and frequent seasonal activities that can then make their way into the battlegrounds or the Nightfall playlists. And to that I say I will believe it when I see it, because if you want to talk about having varied seasonal activities, what they've been doing for the past year and a half ain't it, because the formula has been pretty much identical for a bunch of seasons now. And that's one of the key factors driving community burnout from the game. All right, next up, something that a lot of people are disappointed about, and that is the section on Gambit. And that they said that they haven't really said anything about Gambit since last year when they overhauled it in the Witch Queen, when they made changes to 5 categories. And that the reason they haven't done anything for Gambit is because even with the changes they made, the player retention and engagement just did not shift. I've actually said this before, way back in Season of the Drifter, that there are some reasons, cough cough PvP, why Gambit is not an enjoyable experience. And yet it seems like all of the suggestions, all of the feedback that has been given to Bungie just gets completely ignored, and this is what happens as a result. You have nobody playing the mode, or a limited number of people. And then when Bungie does make any changes, well, those people who left the mode still don't want to play it because they see the key problems in the mode that drove them away from it in the first place. And then they're just like, cool, they made some changes, don't care. So the only thing that Bungie is going to be doing next year is they're going to be bringing back the Dreaming City map. And then they're also going to be adding in Shadow Legion and Lucent Hive as possible enemy types in Gambit, but no other changes are to be expected next year. Which, again, it's unfortunate. I know that, some people would probably play the mode more if, some maps were developed for it. I personally am of the mindset that they need to make overall changes to the Gambit experience, make it more focused on the PvE side, and make invasions have much less of an impact that they currently do. I know everyone else will have their own opinions on the mode, and I'm sure maps would help in some regard, but again, that's just my mindset that it really wouldn't do too much here. So we'll see if they revamp this decision, but regardless, I don't think they should just put the mode to the wayside. They should definitely do something for it and actually give it some purpose in the game again. Next up, they talk about armor set rewards, and in here, this is where they bring up the comment that was made last year that every expansion year would have a ritual armor set added to the game. And in here, they walk back this comment and say that it's too challenging to create sets given how historically low usage they have, and that they don't want to waste development resources, basically. To which I respond, well, why then do we get 2 to 3 Eververse armor sets every season, resources that could just as well be spent making ritual sets instead? And on topic of people not using the armor sets, well, that just goes back to my original criticism of the whole armor mod system, in which, because all armor is reduced to stat sheets, there is no point to using any specific armor sets. People are going to just gravitate towards whatever gives the highest stat points, which historically has been Season Pass armor, raid and dungeon armor, and then focus stat roll armor. So that's typically going to be the categories where you see the most usage from. And because armor that you just get from a ritual vendor typically has lower general stat rolls, that's one of the big reasons why you don't see people using it. And that's another reason why I've always said, and have passed on the feedback for quite some time, that armor in general should actually have gear set bonuses on them tied to the specific activity that they originate from. Actually give armor a use outside of just being a stat sheet. All right, after that, we have a couple of little blurbs on some anti-cheat changes. Obviously, it's not going to be a topic they're going to talk about much because they obviously don't want the cheaters to know what they're doing. So continue building upon that. Definitely a good thing. They also talk a bit about the server stability. Things actually have improved in this regard, and they mentioned that they made a change in the middle of the season, and also one of the recent hot fixes that helped to improve the capture of these server crash issues. They do also bring back up the points that they mentioned before in seasons 22 and 23 launch windows. Will have 2 additional updates that will hopefully resolve all of the issues that happened this year. All right. Next up, they talk about seasonal structure. And if you've watched any of my recent State of Destiny 2 videos, then, I mean, you should have a perfect idea of my exact response to what they said here. Their comment was, since February, they've been working behind the scenes to shake up the seasonal paradigm to subvert player expectations and make each season feel unique. To which I respond, how exactly? Every season for the past 2.5 years has been identically the same thing. It's been identical. We have a 6 to 8 week story with anywhere between 3 and 6 quest objectives per week. And then after that, you have another 6 to 8 weeks where you just languish and are forced to do the core experience. Nothing has changed. So how exactly has the seasonal paradigm changed? How exactly has it subverted player expectations? And how exactly do the seasons feel unique? I don't know. But I can tell you right now that it really hasn't changed anything. And that's really why burnout is accelerating. Moving on, they talk about a number of quality of life updates to the game. And I will say immediately that pretty much all of these changes that they're going to make here, these are things that, I'm glad to see. I'm always a fan of quality of life changes. So being able to favorite shaders to get to them a lot more quickly, definitely a good change. Stasis aspects and fragments, moving to a vendor system, definitely a good change here. It's been, 2.5, 3 years since Beyond Light came out. It's more than fair to have this move over to a vendor system now. Transmats as unlocks. I mean, I don't know why this wasn't done a long time ago, so I'm just glad to see that this is finally happening. Wish Ender going to a quest instead of having those 3 token things. Well, I don't think I actually have a character that has that quest anymore. Being a thing from Forsaken that was a long time ago. But for new players, obviously, this is a good change. Less bloat in your pursuits tab. And then having resources now display in collections alongside their source where you can get them. Definitely something that I am, a fan of. I don't mind having this here. Actually make it easier for new players to see what they have to do to earn some currencies. Iron Banner changing their challenges such that there is now a specific challenge for reputation gains and a specific challenge for your pinnacle drops. We'll have to see what exactly these challenges are. But, if the rep booster one is not as grindy as the current pinnacle armor ones, then I will be a fan. And then finally, having ritual rank ups happen immediately instead of having to wait until you orbit. Definitely, a good change, I feel like. A couple of things for the Sandbox, and they do mention that there's going to be a couple of blogs in the coming weeks regarding these things. Obviously, more strand aspects are coming. This should be no surprise. However, I'm just going to come out and say it already. Just based on these names, as a Warlock main, I'm not very hopeful here. We already had probably the most useless Warlock aspect to drop in the Wanderer, And they're going to be nerfing suspend next season, so sure, they're going to reduce the tangle cooldown, but seriously, who in their right mind is going to use the Wonder with how weak suspend is about to become? And now we're going to get Weave Walk, which to me sounds like the Warlock's access to Woven Mail. And, you know, I mean, Woven Mail, it's a great defensive tool, but, you know, as the supposedly summon-focused class that Bungie said that, you know, Broodweaver was supposed to be, you know, that's not really giving me any kind of a mindset that that's going to be the case. Additionally, we're going to see some more exotic armor reworks and some more exotic weapon changes as well. Some of these changes were pretty good last season, so we'll hopefully continue to pull away from all of these very niche-worthy, hyper specific activation criteria exotics, you know, the ones that I'm not a fan of at all. Like, I really want to see a bunch of those get reworked, focus more on more neutral game exotics, and then things will improve there. They do mention that we're going to be getting new weapon subfamilies incoming. So there will be some new weapon subfamilies with the final shape, and some unexpected additions to Destiny 2's arsenal yet to come as well. So to me, that sounds like we'll be getting some new weapon archetypes as well as a new weapon type in the final shape as well. To me, reading this, to me that kind of reads as if you didn't already know that the raid is going to be Crota's End. This should be everything you need to know that it is now, because it would not surprise me at all to see them have Necrochasm back being, you know, a 900 RPM auto rifle that it was in D1. So having more archetypes coming into play or more subfamilies broaden the arsenal a bit, you know, always a good thing to see. They also mentioned a few quick notes from the Sandbox update alongside some additional details in an upcoming weapon balance update. A few things, variance between ranges for mid-range weapons, reducing the average engagement range. So it kind of sounds like they want to bring engagements closer, which, you know, I don't really enjoy shotgun rushers in Crucible. It's one of the reasons I don't play the mode, and to me it sounds like they're going to be making that more of a case. So hey, I guess I have more of a reason not to play Crucible now. So cool. Also, a little bit of a tidbit that Touch of Malice is going to be getting a little bit of a rework. So hopefully, you know, some more fun. Actually give it some use outside of just the Orcs encounter where you have infinite health. So we'll see. And then finally, the last section of the article is where they talk about the original 4 goals for the Lightfall year and kind of just update the state of where they are right now on this. So first, they talk about expanding imaginations, and with that, they kind of use the argument that the environments that the seasons have had, shifting from Defiance and then into Deep, and then removing the vendor upgrade model, has been a fresh experiment for the game that has been rather successful. And they think that they're on the right track with norm-breaking efforts like these. I mean, again, I mentioned this earlier, but while they have made some changes to specific aspects of the seasonal model, the seasons themselves and the whole orientation of progression through the season has been identical for the past 2 years now. It's still 6 to 8 weeks of seasonal missions, of which you do 3 to 6 steps per week, and then you have to wait until the next weekly reset. And just this whole persistent model of having to do the same thing every season is getting old, and that's where a lot of the burnout is coming from. Now, that's not to take away from the work that they've made in seasonal activities. When I made my initial impressions video of Season of the Deep, you know, I had some high hopes for deep dives. They talked about it as being a potential roguelike activity. I think having a true roguelike activity in Destiny would be a great thing for the game. It's something I think that they should make as a permanent fixture to the game. Talking more something along the lines of what the Division 2 did recently with their Descent game mode. Something like that in Destiny, where you go in, you start with nothing, and you build up over time, you get knocked out, but you earn currency to unlock permanent upgrades. That would be something that you could go back to again and again, and Bungie could iterate upon with seasons to keep that activity fresh. So we'll see what they have planned for the rest of their seasonal progression paradigms or seasonal activities, but until they break the mold with this 6 to 8 week story thing that only resets on the weekly resets, nothing is going to change, and things are just going to be more of the same. I do appreciate the fact that they want to remain laser focused on having a connected story. I know a lot of feedback regarding Lightfall was that the story was really weak, it didn't answer questions. And, you know, I agree with that sentiment. A lot of the things that they had in the past 2 seasons should have been a part of the Lightfall campaign. They do give us the promise right away that the Final Shapes campaign and raid will have the true conclusion to the Light and Dark saga. So, you know, one can hope that that is indeed the case. And, you know, we'll see what happens. All right. This is the category, the second one that I was a strong advocate against since they announced it before Lightfall. They waited until the very last week before the release of Lightfall to publish this article because they knew that it wouldn't be popular. And even to this date, I associate this second category as the primary factor behind so much of the recent population decline. So this whole bringing challenge back to Destiny. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, what they did this year was basically across far and wide the entire game, they made it so that your individual power level did not matter in a number of activities in the game. So they did this with the new Moon of Patrol. To a degree, they did this with Lost Sectors. However, with Lost Sectors, you could still over-level them with your artifact power, albeit the lengths you actually have to reach now are much higher. Anything in the Vanguard playlist now has a power delta. Master raids and dungeons now have power deltas. So that is a majority of the game's content that now has a system in place where your power level does not matter above a certain point. And all this has done is increase the tediousness of specific activities in the game. It makes your character artificially weaker compared to the combatants in the activity. And, you know, all I can think of their reason for doing this is because of how much strength they gave Light 3.0 when really all they needed to do, as I mentioned way back in my State of Destiny blogs from last year, was nerf Jolt and nerf Scorch and Incandescent. But instead, nope, they're going to leave them as basically permanent Trinity Ghoul, a weapon that I have said needed to be nerfed for a long time. And what you get instead is activities where players just demolish all the ads. So their response to that was take away your sensation of power and make it so you can never get above power anymore. This has basically invalidated the entire power grind in the game, and it invalidates the seasonal artifact. So the only thing from the seasonal artifact that matters anymore is the mods. All that XP grinding that you do no longer matters. So they do mention that they're not going to be raising the power cap in Season 22. So once again, folks like myself who are already at the Pinnacle cap basically have nothing to do when it pertains to Pinnacle grind next season. So it'll just be the reprised raid and whatever seasonal content comes out. And then once that's done, well, we're pretty much done for the season again. And this is what really irks me in terms of this blog here. This line right here. So they say that there's still plenty of activities in the game where power is crucial, and then they list every single activity that is now power capped. None of these activities have power that matters anymore. None of them. Power does not matter. Oh, and they also say your artifact power will still be as important as it. No, it doesn't. No, it's not. If artifact power was as important as it ever was, the deltas would have been removed from the game a couple weeks after Lightfall launched. It is not as important as ever. There is no reason to pursue artifact power anymore. Once you hit GM cap level, which right now is 1805, you do not need to farm any more power levels. That is 5 points of pinnacles. You don't even have to hit the pinnacle cap. The only reason to hit the pinnacle cap anymore is so you can get the Guardian rank objective. They have completely invalidated power in Destiny 2. And this is one of the big reasons why I've stopped caring about this game. In a number of previous seasons, one of the big things to do with power was actually work through the artifact levels or earn additional power levels so you could overlevel high tier content, thereby not requiring to have hyper-focused meta loadouts or having to equip your loadouts to exactly match whatever the activity needed. You could go in with whatever you wanted and still have fun. More importantly, you could take players who might not have as much experience in the game, help them level up to the point where they overlevel the hard content, and then they could actually engage with the same content and not feel like they are being a detriment to the team because they are just getting obliterated by it. Now, obviously, this comes hand in hand with another problem. Well, what about players who don't have the time to grind? And, you know, this is something that I think Bungie was kind of taking a two-pronged approach from. Yeah, try to reduce some of this false power creep notion, but also at the same time reduce the amount of must-be level plus requirements. And, you know, I agree that, you know, that sentiment is fine. But at the same time, I have said a number of times over and over again, if you're so irked about those kind of posts, make your own post. Like, you don't have to go and ruin the experience for everyone else in the game just because you're salty that a certain group won't let you in. Finally, they mentioned that they're going to continue to make more Battlegrounds activities into GMs. I mean, all I'm going to say is as long as they can properly balance the load of continually spawning enemies in the activities, then that's fine. I mean, we'll just have to see how it goes for the rest of the year. Next up, they mentioned that they are going to continue to enrich their content. And by this, they mean exotic missions that people have to discover on their own. And that they are also going to be bringing the exotic mission rotator into play next season. We've heard about this before. One of the big pluses here that I'm actually happy to see, though, is that the exotics from previous seasons that are coming back, so Dead Man's Tale and Dead Messenger, are going to be added to the crafting table. Obviously, Revision 0 is already part of it, but it's nice to have these 3 missions back. They are great experiences. And if you haven't done them before, I definitely recommend giving them a go when they come back next season. They also introduce a system that they're calling Pathfinder, which they're going to unveil with the final shape. Not really much talked about here. More so that it's going to target changes to ritual content. So it kind of sounds like they're going to make it so these systems where you can do challenges and then pick the style of activity that you want to do. So let's say there's a bunch of weekly challenges that are like, well, you got to go play 10 Crucible matches or 5 Gambit matches right now. Well, it's kind of sounding like this Pathfinder system is going to give you an option of picking what challenge you want to do. And then once you do that, then it completes that tier and then you can move on to the next one. That system's fine. And then finally, the last thing that they mention is that they're going to be launching the in-game LFG system, which they're calling Fireteam Finder, in Season 23. So, all in all, you know, There are a few things that I would say are good changes to the game here, mainly quality of life things. But again, this really comes off as damage control more than anything else. Like, it's just a bunch of excuses at this point. They had an excuse for not making more PvP maps. They had an excuse for not making more Gambit content, an excuse for not making ritual gear. And then instead of actually acknowledging community sentiment around the whole difficulty changes, they just basically double down with it. So all in all, I don't really know where we go from here. Just based on what we've seen with this blog, it's hard to actually feel like the game's going anywhere that's going to have some kind of a positive resemblance right now. I mean, I guess we'll see in a couple weeks with the showcase what they've got planned for the final shape and maybe beyond. But just my sentiment right now, based on this, is if you're planning on just buying or pre-ordering the deluxe edition right away for the final shape, don't. Like, I would highly recommend right now holding off on that. I mean, in the game's current state, I cannot recommend anyone who hasn't played this game to get into it. I just cannot recommend new people to start this game right now. It feels like Bungie has lost touch with what the player base actually wants, and it feels like they are focused on pleasing such a very small portion of the population who is complaining that the game is too easy, when guess what? Most of us don't want Dark Souls or Elden Ring in the game. If I want to fight a Dark Souls boss, I'll go play Dark Souls. I'm not playing Destiny to have every one of my experiences be a tedious challenge that I'm going to sit there for hours and hours wasting my time at, and then maybe getting something that I'm not going to immediately dismantle for legendary shards. So that's what I feel about the whole State of the Game blog. Hopefully we get some meaningful changes announced in the showcase. Otherwise, I myself might actually be calling it quits with the launch of the final shape. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch everyone whenever the next video is, probably in a couple weeks after the showcase. Have a good one.